Today on the Relationship Renovation podcast, we're lucky enough to have Susie Pettit. She's a certified life, relationship, and parenting coach, and we take a deep dive today into parenting.
We set the boundary, and then remember what I said the kid's job is, it's to push against your boundary. So never, not one of my children has ever been like, that's such a great rule, Mom. I'm so glad.
She talks about how important it is to find that middle ground, to know what the simple but important rules there are to have in your house.
Trying to step back a little and get them to, while it's safe and consequences are not as big, to maybe make some mistakes at home and to learn lessons at home. I like to remove emotional drama from people's lives.
Hello, all, and welcome to the Relationship Renovation podcast. I'm Tarah Kerwin.
And my name is EJ Kerwin, and we are diving right in today. We have a fantastic guest. Her name is Susie Pettit. She's a certified life, relationship, and parenting coach, and she's the host of the top 1% global podcast, The Love Your Life Show. She's looked upon as an expert on boundaries, codependency, emotional intelligence, and healthy relationships. And here's why we're talking to her today, because she's also has 5 sons between the ages of, I think, 19 and 26. So we're going to talk about sort of maybe those more challenging years of parenting when kids get a little bit older into teenage years and maybe even into early adulthood.
And the impacts that does have on the primary relationship with your partner, too.
Absolutely. So welcome, Susie.
Yay,
Thanks
Susie.
for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's so exciting.
Okay, so the first question we always ask is why, how, when? What made you decide to go into kind of this specialty?
Yeah, well, like I think a lot of us, it's our life experience. And for me, if we're talking specifically on the parenting, I had a tumultuous childhood. I had a childhood with a lot of dynamics where I would say that the way that I parent now was not modeled. And one thing I do remember from my childhood, even though stuff would be happening at home and going down, I always had a drive to help people. I can remember in middle school, I used to tell my friends that if they had problems, like write them on little notes and stick them in my locker, and I would help them. And
A life coach in the making.
I was really drawn to, sort of this empathy and helping other people. And I then went on to get my master's of education and became a high school teacher. And always really, though, was drawn to this other level of, like, if there was a team to be coached, I wanted to coach it. If there was a group to be run for middle school girls on confidence, I wanted to run it. And so I did that for many years. And meanwhile, learning, self-development, all that, not really bringing that learning into my marriage, which is why I love your podcast, but bringing that into my parenting and my interaction with kids and teens. And at some point I realized, when I was running these groups, that it really would be much more effective if I worked top down with the parents, because I'm working with the kids and I'm helping them with, certain things to help them feel less anxious and more confident. But if the parents are sort of in their old patterns, it was taking much longer and felt like we were pushing a boulder up the hill. Yeah. And so I started, I really got into life coaching and helping moms in particular, but I do work with moms and dads in sessions too, to help them just learn the stuff that we were not taught in school that make things so much easier from a parenting perspective. That's one of the big feedbacks I get, is that I help make things simpler, that things can feel really, if we're arguing with a teen or we're feeling conflict with our young adult child or our 8-year-old, like that it can feel so heavy and hard and awful. And so I just found that, it's really not as hard as we're all making it. Like this sort of, I guess I think of also, like, I like to remove emotional drama from people's lives, that we just, like, life is hard.
What would that be like? Yeah.
Let's talk.
Yeah, we talk so much about couples about how you need to be aware of transitions. Like, transitions are times where couples destabilize. But I think families destabilize a lot of times when their kids go through big transitions. I know that we're personally going through one now where our youngest are kind of going into adolescence. They're navigating more complicated social dynamics at school, and school's even just like getting harder, and boy girl like relationships are starting off. And I know it's kind of thrown us for a loop. Is that when you see people struggle more with parenting?
Yeah. And I love that you brought it up, because if you think about it, it's a little different now in 2025. But if you think about it, like how many books are written on like how to parent the 2-year-old, like what to expect when they're 3, what to expect when they're 4, and how many are written what to expect when they're 12 or 18 or 22. So what we tend to do, like this transition idea, is that we tend to do what worked when they were like, 2 and 4 and 6. We just do it harder. We're just like digging in, and we're just like, okay, well, it worked then. So like, but what you're speaking to is there's a massive transition in their brains, in what they need from us, in how they act towards us. And when we are not sort of aware of that, and we just create a lot of drama for ourselves again. And so one of the big frameworks that helps many parents is I talk about like the medical model, which is, first, if you're in med school, you do it with the other person does it and you witness. Then you do it with them, and then you do it on your own. And so for kids, what this looks like, and I like thinking of our brains as parents, like when they're, 8 and under, it's our brain on the job. Like it doesn't matter if they want to hold our hands or not crossing the street. It's like we're using my brain to make the decision. So it's all our brain, and our kids just along for the ride. Like, here we go. We're going. You're holding my hand. Really, when they reach 8 to 10, up until 25, it needs to be more of a brain share, more of like our brains working together. We're starting to teach the problem solving skills. We're starting to, not always jump in with the automatic advice on what to do or tell them what to do. We're trying to step back a little and get them to, while it's safe and consequences are not as big, to maybe make some mistakes at home and to learn lessons at home, so that ultimately the job of a parent is that we launch those kids. So 25 on, they're doing it on their own. So, and 25 is, if you think of the period between 10 and 25, like we want, at 10, 90% of our brain, 10% of their brain. Whereas at 25, we're like 10% of our brain, 90% of their brain.
Yeah.
So it's
like a slow transition to autonomy you're trying to support.
Yeah, you're trying to get them so that they're not so dependent on mom, which then also, and mom and dad, which leads to more resilient kids and less anxious kids, is what I have seen. Because when we are, say your kid comes home from middle school and is like, oh my gosh, mom, like my friends were, like they were ignoring me at lunch. Like they just, I was talking and they were pretending like they couldn't hear me, and they were just, talking over me, and I'm so upset, and she starts crying. And we're like, oh my gosh, okay, wait, let me call the mom,
How dare that kid?
I'll get to the bottom of this, honey bunny. You just...
Yeah, we're like, race in, super mom. I will fix this. Hold on, take a breath, slow it down, and let's get them, like they're in middle school. Maybe this is the exact opportunity they need to learn about how to speak up for themselves and how to have these tools. So I have lots of actual ways to do that, but it's just an example of like it's sort of like we're the boss when they're 8 and under. And then right around teenage years, 10, 11, 12, we are fired, sometimes quite harshly, and we become the consultant. And yet part of what we all know as adults is if you're a consultant, you need to be consulted. So it's not just this automatic, hey, I'm the boss, I'm coming in again. So it's that transition for sure causes some stress.
And I wonder too with your parent coaching, because I know, right, we have a ton of blended family dynamics that were really hard for us. Like we had no idea how to figure it out, because I just felt so powerless in my relationship with my stepkids versus my biological kids. And I didn't want to, because I want everyone to feel like I love them just the same, but the dynamics are so different. And I just remember like it caused so much anxiety between the two of us that instead of working together, we were just judging each other. And I'm just like wondering what that's like for when you're doing coaching with parents, when there's like some difficult dynamics and like one's maybe the step parent who's feeling powerless and the other is the biological parent who's feeling super protective. And it's like, what do you do with that? It was one of our biggest, we still work through it. We're much better, but.
For sure. And so this comes up in, families like ours. I also have a blended family. So 2 of my sons are my husband's biological children and 3 are my biological children. And it also comes up in families where they're all your biological, like moms and dads, where it is so helpful to stop and slow it down and get on the same page as to sort of what our jobs are as parents, whether it's what is our job as a stepmom, what is our job as a stepdad, or what is our job as parents in relation to these kids, which is, in my view, a little different. So I say that our job as parents of kids is we have 3 jobs, is that we need to keep them safe. Okay? We need to set boundaries, and we need to teach them how to feel their emotions in a societally correct way. Is it like in a way that is, so they feel anger and they punch their brother. That's not societally like accepted. So you can feel anger and maybe you say words angrily or, that sort of thing. So those are our 3 jobs. And if we can get together with that as parents, that they actually need boundaries, they need something to push against. They need, it is our job to keep them safe until they're out of the house. So what does that look like? That it has different things. The younger they are, it's like hold their hands crossing the street. The older they are, it might be some cell use guidelines. Some, do we allow them to drink in the house? That sort of, there are lots of bigger issues that get there when they have girlfriends. What do we do? Boyfriends, what do we do about that? But like getting on the same page with what your guidelines/boundaries are as a family, super helpful. And then also that understanding that our job is really to help teach them emotional intelligence, what their emotions are, what are the ways to process their emotions, what are to feel. Now, the kids' jobs, when they hit teen years, they have 2 jobs: push against our boundaries and learn how to feel their feelings. So that's where, like, when we as a parent move into parenting, we move into this new transition and we think they're just going to be those lovely little 9-year-olds that come down and they're like, but no, actually their brain has changed, and how they figure out who they are is to push against us. That is actually a sign of a healthy parent-child relationship. The stuff that feels like awfulness to our parent hearts. And so that's their job. So to answer, to return back to your question in terms of like step parenting and or parenting, it is awesome when both parents are on the same page. And when both parents, might schedule a parenting session with me or come in, to you and they stop and they think about, like, let's just spend an hour or even 10 minutes. Like some families don't spend 10 minutes thinking about what our guidelines are for this year. What do we want? What are the ways that we keep our kids safe with TVs in the room or with, like just in general? We don't need that many. Okay. But just in general, because when we say them, then we're much less likely to be reactive, and it's very clear. And then, for step parents, same thing. Like, what do we view our role as? And what my husband, when I met my second husband, he came over and my sons were, I think 10, 12, and 15. I could still be wrong with that, but I was very clear in both what we wanted. He didn't want to be like a dad making the rules for them. And what I wanted for him is I wanted them to have a male figure in their life that loved them and supported them. That's what I wanted from him. I did not need his backup with my, guidelines or my boundaries or all of that. Like, I wanted a male in the house that could set a role model for them in terms of processing healthy emotions, and also was there to love and support my son. And we said that in words. And I think that's a lot of what sort of gets mixed. Now, some families are like, I want you to be more of a father figure. So you're whatever, fill in the blank if it's a step parent type dynamic, and more like that dad role or the mom role. But so much can be soothed and eased with communication. Like, clear as time. When in doubt, shout it out.
Yes. And just hearing the way it's just like the 3 things: boundaries, safety, emotional intelligence. That takes away any of the other layers of blended family and exes and their, like, it just feels so like, oh yeah, that's pretty clear. I think, can I just like, this is like more of like a personal thing because I've always wondered this and I get different kind of feedback from like the research when I Google it. So I used to be like, I just thought it was not okay for kids to have their cell phone in their bathroom because A, they're in the bathroom for like a much longer period than they need to be, skipping dinner, oh my gosh. But like I lost that battle because I was the only one enforcing it. I felt like I was bathroom police. I'd be like, I know you're on your phone in the bathroom. So now I like, it was so overwhelming. It gave me so much anxiety. So now I'm just like, I just gave in. But that part of me is like, I still feel guilty for it, but I also don't want to be bathroom police. And I don't want to be the only person in the home that's doing that. And I found that that was just my own anxiety because I'm like, what are they doing in there? And then also my own giving in to not have my own boundary because I tried for years, Susie, like for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's a great, like, I love how that comes up. And this is a great, like, we get to decide. I guess one of the things, I'm 53, and one of the things that I keep learning is like, no one knows what's best for me or my family better than me. Yeah. So I might Google it and I might see that 14 people say you shouldn't have phones in the bathroom and 13 people say you should. And so then I'm like, well, there you go. But it's like, hold on, let me see, what's right for me and what's right for my family. Now, if that specific circumstance came to me, I would question, you said something, you said if they're in the bathroom, then they miss family dinners. Like I like not having too many guidelines or boundaries in the house. And I like keeping it, like getting clear with me, like what's coming up for me, like them in the bath, like, because you said that you sometimes feel anxious. And so it's like, why? Like, what are we thinking they're doing in the bathroom with that phone? So one, I might have a guideline that we have family dinners. So whatever the heck you're doing with your phone or whatever the heck you're doing with so like, this Mondays at 6, we're here, and Tuesdays at 5:30, we're here. Yeah, so-and-so has
those
gymnastics.
Boundaries.
And so the guideline is more the family dinner. And whether they're on the phone in the bathroom or they're, crocheting in their bedroom, it doesn't matter. We come to the table for dinner. And that's something that we agree with. And then if we have anxiety over maybe they're doing something in the bathroom, some sexual exploration or that sort, like then that's another thing that like me as a mom, we're not like nagging them because they can do that anywhere. Yeah. We can get more like, oh, okay, let me look into like phone things that I can put on there for I'm blanking on the word, restrictions, or I can to work on my own mind about what I'm thinking they're doing in there and my fears that are coming up with that. And is there anything from my past and my past sexual exploration that I can, breathe out? And
and I think like with EJ, he soothed me because he's like, Tarah, I talk to my boys about what they see on, on screen versus what real love is and what real sex is.
We had always had really direct conversations from early on about like, look, this is something that's going to appear and it's not reality and it's harmful. Actually, it forms your perception around what the opposite sex is and what your own sexuality is. We always had pretty direct conversations. I think you like that. I think the hardest thing was always just like, because when you were saying that, I was thinking back on like, I never like disagreed. I wasn't like, no, Tarah, they should have their phones in the bathroom. But it almost felt like I wasn't ever a good enough cop. Like I wasn't like she was always like, see, they're in there again. I'm like, well, first of all, I didn't even know they were in there. And then really, I'm kind of doing the same thing you are. I'm knocking on the door being like, are you in there with the phone? It's like, so for us, and this is this way around a lot of things, not just phones, but around like, staying on top of homework or I don't know, like screen time is always a huge thing, but it's always like, it feels like my level of vigilance and Tarah's level of vigilance never match up. And so therefore I feel like kind of like I'm getting my balls busted and then Tarah feels like she's not supported.
I'm sure you hear this a lot.
Yeah, but it's never out of like, it never feels like it's out of like, oh, she's crazy Or I don't think it's out of like, I don't know, you'd have to tell me, Tarah, but like, oh, he just doesn't give a shit. Like, it's just like that we're not the same.
Yeah, what I want to sort of like back up and like zoom out on is that whatever the thing is, like we're sort of missing the point here that what we're trying to teach our kids is skills, whether it's homework and following through on one of our guidelines in the house is that like you complete all work. Like it doesn't, because that's, you might not like it, but like that we're trying to zoom out and what skills are we trying to teach them? That things on the internet are there. They're going to see them. What are we trying to teach them? Healthy, like they get to know for themselves and they learn for themselves what a healthy, or unhealthy level, not looking at it at all is, or screen time. So what we do is, because otherwise we get involved. And so it's not good for the marriage. Because then, it's like, well, you just wait till dad comes home or you wait till mom sees. It's also not good for the parent-child relationship because it's involving the parent where the parent, I don't want the parent to be involved in that case. I want the kid to have a relationship with the thing that we're trying to figure out, whether it's phone use or following through on, homework, or like they aren't doing it because they're going to get in trouble with mom. They're doing it because finishing the homework feels good and they've kept their word to themselves and they don't, and they've learned how to do it, because that's the skill we're trying to get when they're out. And that is why then coming together as parents and having those conversations, like what's the main thing here? Because we end up doing this. We end up like just split and then we end up like in our marriages fighting about like,
and then it spins off into an argument about 10 other things.
And then they get defensive and then we get defensive. And it's just this whole like, versus, again, I didn't have very many guidelines in my house, but some of them were like, you don't sleep with your phone in your room. We had a bedtime until they graduated from high school, which this is like my golden moment as a mom, because so one of the things we have to realize as parents is that we set the boundary. And then remember what I said the kid's job is, it's to push against your boundary. So never, not one of my children has ever been like, that's such a great rule, mom. I'm so glad that I can't have my phone in my room. And I'm so glad that you make me, like on a weeknight, go to bed by 11 as a senior in high school. Like you're so reasonable. I'm so glad. And can I tell you that all three of my sons have come back. The ages were a little off. It's like 20, 22 and 27. They've all said that was one of the best things that they've learned to have a bedtime. They're like, mom, in college, like kids are not like realizing that like bedtime is good for their health and that it's and not sleeping with their cell phones because otherwise they're going to bed. And I'm like, right. Thank you.
Yay, Susie,
you don't hear that
it
when they're in the house with you. But so it is sort of this, first of all, for the sake of the marriage, to just decide like, okay, we have a guideline that there are no phones in the bathroom, period, end of story. Or we don't, because what is our fear around having the phones in the bedroom, the bathroom, that they're going to do this thing? They're going to do the thing. Yeah. And if they're not doing it in the bathroom, then maybe they're doing it in the bathroom at school where they're getting in trouble, or they're doing it in that, like, that's the thing with kids that I'm always saying that, like, I think of kids like Play-Doh, and when we come down like parents and we're squeezing, the harder we squeeze it, what do? They squeeze out the sides. Yeah. Because their job is to push against us. They like lose sight of what we're even talking about. They're just like, oh, mom doesn't want me to eat rice. And then they're like in the closet shoving rice in their mouth. Like, I know it's just this like,
I love what you're saying though, of like, figure out what your basic rules are together and then communicate it. Because one of the big things I think that cuts out is what a lot of parents do. I know we do it, is you only deal with stuff when it's a problem. You're only having the tough discussions between the two of you when your kid has crossed some limit. You're only addressing things when things have gone like totally haywire. And it's the worst time. It's the worst time, whether it's just something that has nothing to do with kids, just in our relationship. We want to deal with things and get ahead of it. Yeah. But isn't always the way it plays out.
That it's not about me and my anxiety. It's that making sure EJ and I are aligned in what our values are, what the boundaries are, what the limits are. Because otherwise we do make it about us and then we just put all of our stuff onto them and they're going to squeeze out the sides anyway. And we don't want that. I just have to remember it's about launching them. Like, I think and this is where like, and I'm sure you've heard, like, being from a more like traumatic childhood, I'm like, I just want to make sure you're loved every second of the day and that you always feel loved. And I know that I have to have them go through hardship and I have to have them go through difficult things because they can handle it. I mean, I know what I went through at 8 years old. I was buying my own food and working. I'm really resilient. And so it's about trusting
because you figured it out. Right.
And that trusting that kids are resilient, but so many, I can't share with you how many couples we see here where there's like the helicoptering going on. They don't want their kids to be uncomfortable. And I've learned that is the best way to bring out who they are in their character. I just know early on, being a new parent, I had to learn all of that and know how it, paralleled with my childhood and all of that stuff. Like you said, you parented the way you weren't parented when you were.
Right. But I didn't know that for a bit. But it is, you guys talk about relationships being containers of growth. I view parenting as like the biggest self-development course on steroids.
Greatest
it's like
teachers.
The biggest growth container, because if we're nervous about them in the bathroom, that's not about them. Like, what are we, trying to bring it back to, like, what are our guidelines? And then we just let go of the rest. That's where a lot of the drama leaves in houses of teenagers and young adults. If we're like, we do family dinners together at this time, you're expected to get your homework done at this time, you're expected to be at these, whatever, your job or your sports or your whatever. And then what you do in your free time, we're going to manage our own feelings around. We're going to manage our own anxieties around. And then we have the fear of, what about cutting? And what about this? And it's like, okay, what about it? I always say, fact check your fears. Like, if your kid is cutting, then yeah, we're going to have some different guidelines. Like, I definitely, and I know you guys have a past of eating disorders and all that stuff comes up. But what we find is that right now we had more helicopter parenting coming in. And what are we seeing? Way more anxious kids and way fewer kids launching. The failure to launch thing is real. This learned helplessness, because mom and dad are over functioning and the kid learns to underfunction. So there are two things. Do you want to say?
I was just going to let you know, like, our 16-year-old son, he just got his license and he was telling us about how so many of his friends are not getting their license because they don't really want to drive. And I'm like, oh, that is so sad, Susie. I just feel really sad about that.
Yeah. Because they feel nervous, because they feel, and it's so there are two things that really help me. One, I like thinking of roller coaster bar parenting instead of helicopter parenting, or where if you think of, you get on a roller coaster, okay, and what's the first thing you do? You pull that bar against you. And if it's too tight, you're like, it's too tight. So that's our parents that are like too domineering, too restrictive, too like all in your business. Okay. Like, that's too tight. And then what's the very next thing you do? You push it to the ground. And if it goes all the way to the ground and there's nothing there and that's equally destabilizing.
Yeah, you're not safe.
Yeah.
Right. So we want it in the middle. That's why I say one of our jobs as a parent is to give boundaries. They need something to push against. They need to feel seen, soothed, and heard. Like, they matter. And it's like, oh, mom cares about me. She's telling me I can't have my darn phone in my room and I have to go to bed, and they're irritated about that. But like, mom cares. So it's a little different than, maybe an 8-year-old needing to shop on your own. And we're just like, that's like all over there, the bars at the bottom, versus like my dad was like super restrictive in everything we did. And like, are you breathing right? Was sort of that attitude. We want it more in the middle, which is more nuanced parenting and takes more hands-on. I have one more model I want to talk about that's helpful. But before I get there, I just wanted to talk to the listener who maybe doesn't have a spouse who they even feel like they can have these conversations with boundaries,
so
or because that was me in my first marriage. And all hope is not lost. You can still do this. You just sit down with yourself, figure out what your boundaries are, figure out what's important to you, and then you get to follow through with those. And then one of the things I like to say in my head while I was working through my own marriage issues, because if that's the case, then we want to look at and maybe get into a session with Tarah and EJ. But one of the things I used to say is my kids have the exact, and for me, it was their dad. My kids have the exact dad they need to become the men they're going to become. That these are the skills that yes, maybe we're not on the same page as parents, but this is the dad they were given. This is their learning skills here. It's again, keeping an eye on that end game. That like, they're going to have this dad for the rest of the life. So the skills they're learning and speaking up for themselves or all that sort of stuff are helping them. And that didn't make me feel as alone. Or sometimes I hear parents that they're like, well, my husband won't do it, so I can't. And that's not, any little thing we do is helpful.
Well, and I even think like sometimes, even though like these moments that we've had have created conflict between the two of us around, screen time and maybe even education at times, I like to rest back on the fact also that like, well, we care. We both care. It's not like we both don't just give a crap and we're just like laissez-faire and like whatever will be, will be. And so, yeah, it creates conflict between the two of us. But at the end of the day, even if sometimes I do think like maybe Tarah is like a little extra grippy, and sometimes I know she thinks that I'm way too laid back
Under
about
grippy.
certain things. It's but like we both know we really love the kids and we're willing to. We're willing to have difficult conversations, and we keep trying to find that middle ground between the two of us. And I think our kids appreciate that.
It is. And like, I mean, Susie, you know that for sure. Like with blended families, like, the two older boys have a whole different environment every other week where, I've learned you can only control what is happening in our home. And that hopefully it's enough. And I think us caring, and they know we do.
Yeah. And I guess like that, what can we control? Because yes, if it's a blended family, we can only control what happens in our home. And I had a 50-50 custody split. So I just focused on like for 50% of the time, I get to, do this. But we also have to keep in mind that yes, we can control what's happening in the home, but like that control, like what can we control again? Because if we're squeezing them like Play-Doh and we're like, you can't do that, then they're going to find other ways. The kid usually isn't like, okay, mom doesn't want me to look at, porn, or mom doesn't want me to do whatever. So, okay, mom, you're right. They're like, well, how do I find it some other way? And they miss out on the question in their brain. Do I even want to be doing this? Is this, I remember that conversation I had with dad where like, this isn't great for my future relationships. But if his job there is to push against mom, they lose that. And they're like, they're just pushing against mom. So one of the things that my other framework
it's
that helps
that healthy
so much,
balance. It's exactly the roller coaster ride.
It's the roller coaster. It's coming up with something that feels comfortable. So, one of the main things that helps us parents not feel as anxious and, like this heavy responsibility that I think I see more in my clients where we've come from traumatic backgrounds, that like hypervigilance, and it's our responsibility to make sure everyone's happy and that kids are fine and husband's fine. And like that, like it feels like we're crawling out of our skin is, a positive discipline. I don't know if it's a technique or they call it lovingly detached or loving detachment, which is in, our speak is the difference between empathy and codependency. Empathy is caring about what our kids are going through and having empathy and being like, oh, we're like humans with another human having a human experience. Like, that's really hard, son, that you didn't get the job, or that's really hard that, your friends did that to you at lunch. Codependency is feeling responsible to solve it for them. And that it's our job and it's this heaviness and we're thinking about it at night and we're like over obsessing about it. And loving detachment, it's not loving attachment. Attachment is when we feel that responsibility or the heaviness, like we need to solve it. Like it's our way is the right way. And it's that like, rigidity versus loving detachment is like we can love them. We can, have sort of a mindset that like this is happening for them. Think this is part of their learning. This is what they're getting here in Earth School right now. This is where, their lesson here. And one thing I talk about popcorn parenting. So, which makes it sort of fun. So it has two premises. Like one, we have a mindset or belief that like our kids have the experiences they're meant to have to become those adults that when we look at our past, like part of what makes us the amazing people that we are now are the hardships, are the bumps in the road, are the, this ends up well. And so where the popcorn parenting comes in is like, pretend you two are going in to a movie theater and I'm somehow in your area and you see me like you're going into like the top new release and I'm coming out and you're like, hey, Susie, I'm like, oh my God, it's the best movie. Like there's so many tops and turns, but like it all ends up in the end. And you're like, we haven't seen it Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were coming out. I thought you knew that Claire and John got together and Joey gets the job. And you're just like, so you go into the movie and but so you two are watching the movie and there are tosses and turns. There are ups and downs, but you're like, you have in the back of your mind that you're like, well, Susie said it all ends up fine. So, so you're watching it and you're still emotional and you're like, don't go down the alley, but you're like watching and you're playing along. That's the mindset we want with our kids. That we know and so instead of fear and anxiety and, oh my God, are they going to be cutting? And oh my God, are they going to like, blah, blah, and what does this mean? We're like, okay, calm down, cowgirl. Like this is exactly where they need to be. Let's go back to faith over fear parenting, manage my own nervous system, check in with myself. And then the popcorn part of it is, like, how do I say it? Like, stop thinking you're the ruler of the universe. Like, so when the movie is, they're going down the dark alley, what do? We don't hop up and try to call the director and be like, you need to change the plot. Like, this shouldn't be happening now. Like, we sit back and we eat our popcorn.
Yeah.
So we as parents,
we stay tuned.
Yeah, we stay tuned. It's like, every parent of a teenager has their teenage kid come in. You're like all excited. They come home from school and you're like, hi, here's the little like snack I made for you. And they throw down their backpack and they go upstairs and you're like, and your nervous system is like immediately in that fear. And instead we regulate ourselves. We take some deep breaths. We're like, okay, they know I'm here. They know I'm if they need my kid to, and ridiculously, the movie camera doesn't follow our kid upstairs. Okay. We're not up there on the door. Are you okay? Are you all right? Like that anxious attachment part. Yeah. We're downstairs. We're cool. We're breathing. We might actually make some popcorn. So we sit down there. And then when they come down for our family dinner or we drive them in the car and we just allow some space and they're like, oh, I had a real tough time at school today. And they just tell us about it. And we don't jump in with our auto advice.
Safe. Yeah.
Because we're a consultant. Okay. They're not saying, what do you think I should do, mom? They're just telling you. It's a lot of the skills you guys teach in relationships. Like, does your wife want you to fix it or do you want to or are you here to I just want to share? But
yeah. Well, and I just have to share this too, because like everything that you just said kind of normalized, because once the twins were born and all this trauma was like just there, I did so much work. And I'll never forget, my trauma therapist was like, because they're going to like one of the top schools in the nation. And they're like in 3rd grade and 4th grade doing all of this math. And I'm like, okay, guys, like I get so anxious. Like, we have to make sure we're getting all this math done. And my trauma therapist was like, Tarah, you're over functioning for everybody in your family. And I was like, what is the only feeling I knew ever? Because that's what I did. Yes. So when she said, are you going to be doing their math homework when they're in college? I was like, no. She's like, they're in 3rd or 4th grade. You're doing it now. They're going to expect you to do this in college. And I was like, what? And I just remember her giving me permission to recognize that, and from that day, I'm telling you, like, yeah, you guys don't do your homework, the consequences, you get a bad grade, you're going to have to go to math hours. Sorry. But I can't tell you, for listeners here, like making that shift from over functioning to just being that lovingly detached has been significant. I hope you've seen it in me, but
absolutely. And I love the message within that popcorn parenting is of like, because it really says like, I believe in you, kid. Like I believe that you're going to be fine and you're going to figure it out. And then it also is like, I believe in myself. I believe that I'm a pretty damn good parent. I'm good enough. And I make mistakes and they're going to have some ups and downs, but we have this. And that's like the opposite of that anxiety that kids are coming out with, which is like, it's not safe. It's not okay. I won't be all right on my own. So I'm going to never leave. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that there could be parents that are doing math in college. Like I know there are parents that are calling their kids, did you turn in your math homework? And so that's one of the things I just want to highlight for listeners is the reason why we're doing this when they're younger is that the consequences are less, because a bad grade on a 3rd grade math thing is not as big a deal as if they don't turn in their proposal for their first job. Exactly. They might get fired. And so we want them to learn these things. Now I need to say to the parents who are like, oh, it's too late, Susie, my kids are already lunch. It's never too late. You get to do this now. because at any age, it is that like there are people feeling overly responsible for like, oh my God, it's my job to remind him to get a gift for his girlfriend. And it's like, slow down. Let's slow like just again, like any day is a good day to start to practice any of this. Calming our nervous system first is.
I just have to share something funny, Susie, because I'm like, oh my gosh, hopefully she's not listening. I have a friend whose son is going to his first year of college, and she bought an apartment down the street from his dorm.
No.
On the other side of the country. I can't say a word because I'm her friend. Yeah. But I'm just like, oh, anxious attachment right there. Front and center, baby. Codependency, there it is.
You're like, okay, I'm going to shut.
But Susie, I'm telling you, it's for her, it's the most normal. This is just what you do. And I love what you're doing because I feel like you're helping. Gosh, make it simple, letting go. Like my anxiety is so much less because of everything you just said and doing my own work. My kids are thriving. They're amazing. They can handle it, And so if you guys are listening to this and just need some of those like pointers, tips, making it simple, how can people find you?
Well, you know what? This is so great because I was just thinking that like, the people we surround ourselves with influence us greatly. So if we're in these school environments and all the other third grade kids who aren't doing their homework are now getting math tutors and going to this extra, then we're going to feel like that contagion is contagious. Yes. And if every other mom is buying an apartment down the road from her kid, then we're going to be like, what's wrong with me? And so one of the best ways it's to recognize, there are some things in our lives that we're like, okay, no, we're still sending them to this school. So we'll be in this environment, but what do we have control over? Well, let's put the Love Your Life Show podcast in our ears. Let's put the Relationship Renovation podcast in our ears. That actually starts retraining. I have 2 podcast episodes, one called Loving Detachment, one called Popcorn Parenting, that it's just gives more examples, more normalizing this versus normalizing the anxious culture that, oh my God, my daughter's anxious. What do I do? Like, okay, first we need to manage our own anxiety. We need to regulate ourselves. So I would love people to listen into my podcast would be a great thing. I also run the Love Your Life School, which is my solution to really teach those things. When I was getting the notes in the middle school lockers, I really wanted to teach people the skills and the things that make their lives easier, that don't feel as hard, that, it still will feel hard when we tell our kid, actually, we're starting something new. We're doing family dinners and you can do whatever the heck you want with your phone in the bathroom. Like, go at it. But like, it gives them the support. We have weekly life coaching. I have classes in there. It brings sort of my master's of education. I get to teach a little. And,
I love the name, Love Your Life School. Heck yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
we will.
Lessons learned.
We'll place those right down in the show notes and links directly to your website as well. So, thank you so much. It's been a fun conversation about parenting and just about life.
Such a great flow.
Us parents unite. Yes. It is self-development. It's like.
But just that idea, Susie, that things can be easier. Like we put so much easier. That is the energy I get from you. So again, hopefully listeners are getting that too. Like it is simple: safety, boundaries, emotional intelligence. If you're in a partnership,
if we use our brain from our parenting, we do. So it's just like it just feels so much easier once we start.
I'm so glad that you were doing those little locker notes in 3rd and 4th grade and seeing what you're doing today. It's pretty awesome. So thank you so much for being a guest with us. And as always, take care of yourself, take care of each other. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.